Let me start with a question that sounds almost unbelievable. What if I told you that one of the most powerful sources of radiation exposure most people will ever experience isn't a nuclear weapon, a power plant, or a military accident? It's a medical scan. In fact, millions of people are exposed to ionizing radiation every single day inside hospitals, often without realizing how powerful it actually is. Now, before we go any further, let me be very clear about something. Medical imaging saves lives. A CT scan can detect internal bleeding, tumors, strokes, and life-threatening infections in minutes. Doctors use these tools to diagnose problems that would otherwise remain invisible. But here's the deeper issue, and this is where the story becomes interesting. The danger isn't the technology itself. The danger is how often it's used and how little most people understand about what's happening inside their body when radiation enters their cells. Here's what's really going on inside your body. CT scans and X-rays work by sending ionizing radiation through tissues. That radiation is powerful enough to knock electrons off atoms, literally altering the structure of molecules inside your cells. And when that radiation strikes DNA, it can create tiny breaks in the genetic code. Your body has repair systems that fix most of this damage, but not always. And when the repair fails, those mutations can slowly accumulate. Years later, they may show up as cancer. Now here's the part most people never hear. In 2023 alone, about 93 million CT scans were performed, and researchers estimate that radiation from those scans could contribute to over 100,000 future cancer cases. That's not because doctors are careless, it's because modern medicine is incredibly good at detecting problems, but often less focused on asking a deeper question: is this scan absolutely necessary? Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your DNA as a massive instruction manual, about 3 billion letters long. Radiation is like randomly firing microscopic bullets through that manual. Most of the time, the bullet hits empty space. Sometimes it hits a word. Occasionally it hits a critical instruction. And if the wrong instruction changes, the cell can begin growing out of control. This is why physicists like Richard Feynman often reminded us that powerful technologies are never dangerous by themselves. Misunderstanding them is. So today, I want to do something very important, not scare you, not demonize medicine, but help you understand the biology, the physics, and the metabolic context behind medical radiation exposure so you can make smarter health decisions for the rest of your life. Because once you understand how the body repairs DNA, how nutrition affects radiation resilience, and when imaging is truly necessary, you gain something incredibly powerful: control. In this video, we're going to break down 6 surprising truths about hospital radiation that almost nobody talks about, and more importantly, the practical steps you can take to protect your long-term health without avoiding life-saving medicine. And if you care about understanding your body at this deeper level, the metabolism, the physiology, the root causes behind disease, consider subscribing. Every day on this channel, we translate complex science into practical tools you can actually use. Because the goal isn't just to treat disease, the goal is to build a body that resists it in the first place. Now let's start by looking at the 6 key insights most people never learn about medical radiation. Before we go deeper, let's step back and look at the big picture. There are 6 critical insights about medical radiation that almost nobody explains clearly to patients. Once you understand these, the entire conversation about hospital imaging becomes much easier to navigate. Here are the 6 ideas we're going to unpack together. First, we'll examine why CT scans deliver far more radiation than most people realize, sometimes the equivalent of hundreds of chest X-rays in a single scan. Understanding this comparison changes how you think about routine imaging. Second, we'll explore what radiation actually does inside your cells, particularly how it damages DNA and how your body attempts to repair that damage. This is where biology, physics, and medicine intersect. Third, we'll discuss something rarely talked about in hospitals. Radiation is cumulative. Your body doesn't reset exposure after each scan. The total dose adds up across your lifetime. If this explanation style is helpful so far, consider subscribing. This channel is all about making complex health science simple and useful. Fourth, we'll look at why children and younger adults are more vulnerable to radiation damage and why unnecessary imaging early in life can carry long-term consequences decades later. Fifth, we'll break down a powerful but often ignored factor: your metabolic health dramatically affects how well your body repairs radiation damage. Nutrients, antioxidants, sleep, and liver function all play a role. And finally, sixth, we'll go through practical strategies you can use to protect yourself, how to ask better questions before a scan, how to minimize unnecessary exposure, and how to support your body's natural DNA repair systems afterward. So this conversation is not about fear, it's about understanding the science so you can make informed decisions, because the goal isn't to avoid medical technology, the goal is to use it wisely. Now let's begin with the first insight, the one that surprises almost everyone, just how powerful a single CT scan really is. Let's start with the first major insight. Most people believe that all medical imaging is roughly the same. An X-ray is an X-ray. A scan is a scan, just different machines looking inside the body. But in reality, the radiation dose between these technologies is dramatically different. Here's what's really going on. A standard chest X-ray uses a very small burst of radiation that passes through the body once to create a simple image. But a CT scan works very differently. A CT scanner rotates around your body, sending dozens or even hundreds of radiation beams through the same tissues from multiple angles. A computer then reconstructs these beams into a detailed three-dimensional image. Think of it like the difference between taking one photograph of a house versus walking around the house and taking hundreds of photos from every angle. The CT scan is incredibly powerful because it gives doctors a complete internal map of the body, but that power comes with a trade-off. The radiation exposure can be significantly higher. For example, a typical chest CT scan can expose a patient to about 7 millisieverts of radiation, while a single chest X-ray is about 0.1 millisieverts. In other words, one CT scan can equal roughly 70 chest X-rays in radiation dose. Some abdominal CT scans can reach the equivalent of 100 to 200 X-rays depending on the protocol. And this isn't theoretical. A large analysis published in ** National Institutes of Health Research estimated that medical CT imaging contributes significantly to population radiation exposure in developed countries. Again, none of this means CT scans are bad. In emergency medicine, they are one of the greatest diagnostic tools ever invented. They can detect internal bleeding after trauma, early strokes, blood clots in the lungs, tumors hidden deep inside the body. The problem arises when CT scans are used when simpler tests would work just as well. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine you have a powerful flashlight. If you're searching for someone lost in a dark forest, that flashlight is life-saving. But if you're just checking whether your keys are on the kitchen table, you probably don't need to shine a military searchlight across the entire house. In medicine, the same principle applies. Sometimes an ultrasound or MRI, which do not use ionizing radiation, can answer the same question. Other times, careful observation and blood tests are enough. But modern healthcare systems often prioritize speed and certainty, and CT scans deliver both. Now here's an empowering shift in thinking. You, as a patient, can participate in this decision. A simple question can make a big difference. Is this scan necessary right now, or are there safer alternatives? Most doctors actually welcome that conversation, because good medicine is not about using the most powerful tool every time. It's about using the right tool at the right moment. And understanding this difference is the first step toward protecting your long-term health. If this kind of science-based explanation is helping you see medicine in a new way, consider subscribing. I share content like this every day, breaking down complex health topics into tools you can actually use. Now that we understand the power of CT radiation, the next question becomes even more fascinating. What exactly happens inside your cells when radiation enters the body? That's where the real biology begins. Now that we understand how powerful a CT scan can be, the next question becomes far more interesting. What actually happens inside your body when radiation passes through your tissues? To understand this, we need to zoom all the way down to the level of a single cell. Inside every cell of your body is DNA, a molecular instruction manual that tells that cell how to function, when to grow, when to repair itself, and when to die. This instruction manual contains about 3 billion genetic letters, and your cells work very hard to protect it. But ionizing radiation has a unique property. It carries enough energy to knock electrons out of atoms, which can destabilize molecules inside the cell. Here's what's really going on inside your body. When radiation passes through tissue, it can interact with water molecules, which make up roughly 70% of your cells. This interaction creates highly reactive particles called free radicals. These free radicals are chemically unstable. They bounce around the cell looking to stabilize themselves, often reacting with nearby molecules. Sometimes those molecules are harmless proteins, but sometimes the target is DNA itself. And when free radicals strike DNA, they can cause something called strand breaks, small fractures in the genetic code. Your body has impressive repair systems designed to fix these breaks. Enzymes constantly scan DNA, detect damage, and attempt to repair it. In fact, your cells repair thousands of DNA errors every single day just from normal metabolic activity. But radiation damage is different. Sometimes the break occurs in both strands of DNA at the same location, something called a double-strand break. Those are much harder to repair correctly. When repair fails, the cell may either die or survive with a mutation. And if that mutation occurs in genes that control cell growth, the result can be the beginning of cancer. This is why organizations like the World Health Organization and the International Atomic Energy Agency classify ionizing radiation as a known carcinogen. But here's the part that often gets overlooked. Your body isn't defenseless. You have an entire biological defense system designed to handle oxidative stress and DNA damage. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your DNA as a massive library filled with billions of books. Radiation is like a few sparks landing inside the building. Most sparks burn out immediately, but if enough sparks accumulate, or if the fire suppression system isn't working well, a page might burn. Your body's fire suppression system includes antioxidants, repair enzymes, and metabolic processes that keep cells stable. And this is where metabolism becomes incredibly important, because the strength of your repair systems depends heavily on nutrient availability, sleep quality, liver detoxification capacity, antioxidant status, hormonal balance. For example, nutrients like vitamin C, vitamin E, selenium, zinc, and glutathione help neutralize free radicals before they damage DNA. This is one reason why metabolically healthy individuals tend to have stronger cellular repair systems. What the research shows is that oxidative stress driven by poor diet, chronic inflammation, and high insulin levels can weaken these repair mechanisms. In other words, two people could receive the exact same radiation exposure, but their bodies might respond very differently depending on their metabolic health. And this leads directly to the next critical insight. Because radiation exposure doesn't happen in isolation. Your body remembers every dose you've ever received. Let's talk about why radiation is cumulative, and why that matters more than most people realize. Now we arrive at the third insight, and this one changes how many people think about medical imaging entirely. Radiation exposure is cumulative. Your body does not reset back to zero after each scan. Every dose adds to the total radiation your tissues have absorbed over your lifetime. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your DNA as a massive highway system with millions of roads. Every time radiation passes through your body, it's like a few tiny potholes forming along those roads. Most of the time, your body's repair crews come out immediately and fix the damage. The pavement is restored, traffic continues, and everything functions normally. But occasionally, a repair is incomplete, a small flaw remains, and over decades, if enough of those flaws accumulate in the wrong place, the system can begin to malfunction. That's essentially how radiation risk works. It's not usually about one single exposure. It's about the total exposure across an entire lifetime. This concept is called cumulative dose. Radiation scientists measure this dose in units called millisieverts, which represent the amount of energy absorbed by body tissues. Research analyzed by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and the National Cancer Institute shows that medical imaging is now one of the largest sources of artificial radiation exposure for the general population. Decades ago, most radiation exposure came from natural background sources like cosmic rays or minerals in the soil. Today, medical imaging, especially CT scans, contributes a major portion of lifetime radiation exposure in many countries. Now here's something most patients never track. By the time someone reaches their 50s or 60s, they may have accumulated radiation from CT scans, dental X-rays, mammograms, fluoroscopy procedures, repeated emergency imaging. Each one individually may be justified, but together they create a total biological dose that most people never think about. And here's where awareness becomes incredibly powerful. You don't need to avoid medical care, but you can start tracking your exposure history. Just like people track medications or surgeries, it's wise to remember major imaging procedures. For example, if you've already had multiple CT scans of the abdomen, your doctor might consider whether an MRI or ultrasound could answer the same question next time. Small decisions like this can reduce lifetime exposure significantly. And there's another layer to this story that's rarely discussed. Your body's ability to repair radiation damage isn't constant throughout life. Certain groups are much more vulnerable than others. Children, for example, are dramatically more sensitive to radiation than adults. Why? Because their cells are dividing much faster, which means any DNA damage has more opportunities to spread through the body. So in the next section, we're going to explore why age plays such a powerful role in radiation risk and why doctors are especially cautious when imaging younger patients. But before we move on, if this explanation is helping you see medicine through a clearer scientific lens, consider subscribing. Every day on this channel, we break down complex physiology, metabolism, hormones, nutrition, longevity into simple strategies you can use to protect your health. Because once you understand how the body actually works, you start making decisions very differently. Now let's look at the fourth insight, and this one is particularly important for parents. Radiation does not affect everybody the same way. Age plays a major role in how sensitive our tissues are to radiation damage. Children and younger adults are significantly more vulnerable to ionizing radiation than older individuals. Here's what's really going on inside the body. Children's cells are dividing much faster than adult cells. Their organs are still developing, tissues are growing rapidly, and billions of cells are constantly copying DNA to create new cells. And every time DNA copies itself, there is a chance that damage can be carried forward. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine writing a book by hand and then asking someone to copy it page by page. If one page contains a typo, that typo can spread into every new copy that's made afterward. The faster the copying process happens, the more opportunity exists for that error to multiply. That's essentially what happens in rapidly dividing tissues. When radiation damages DNA in a child's cell, that mutation may be copied again and again as the body grows. And because children have many more decades of life ahead of them, there is also more time for that mutation to eventually develop into disease. Research supported by the National Cancer Institute shows that children may be several times more sensitive to radiation-related cancer risk compared with adults receiving the same dose. That doesn't mean children should never receive imaging. Sometimes scans are absolutely necessary, especially for injuries, infections, or serious medical conditions. But it does mean that doctors are increasingly careful to apply something called the ALARA principle. ALARA stands for as low as reasonably achievable. The idea is simple. If imaging is needed, the radiation dose should be kept as low as possible while still producing a useful image. Many pediatric hospitals now use specialized CT protocols that reduce radiation exposure dramatically compared with older scanning techniques. And in many situations, doctors will choose ultrasound or MRI first because those technologies do not use ionizing radiation at all. But there's another layer to this conversation that most people never consider. Your body's biological resilience also plays a role. The strength of your immune system, your antioxidant levels, your sleep quality, and even your metabolic health can influence how well your cells respond to stress, including radiation stress. In other words, the environment inside your body matters, which brings us to a fascinating and empowering insight. Because your nutritional status and metabolic health can directly influence how effectively your body repairs cellular damage. This is where physiology, nutrition, and longevity science intersect. In the next section, we're going to explore how things like insulin levels, inflammation, antioxidants, and mitochondrial health affect your body's ability to repair DNA. And more importantly, what practical steps you can take to strengthen those repair systems naturally. Now we arrive at one of the most empowering insights in this entire discussion. Radiation exposure is only half of the story. The other half is something you have far more control over: your metabolic health. Two people can receive the exact same radiation dose, the same CT scan, the same X-ray, the same exposure, yet their bodies may respond very differently. Why? Because the strength of your cellular repair systems depends heavily on the internal environment of your body. Here's what's really going on inside your cells. When radiation creates free radicals and DNA damage, your body immediately activates repair pathways. Enzymes begin scanning DNA for breaks, antioxidants neutralize unstable molecules, and mitochondria generate the energy required for repair. But these systems require nutrients, metabolic balance, and low inflammation to function properly. If the body is already under stress, high insulin levels, chronic inflammation, poor sleep, nutrient deficiencies, those repair mechanisms become less efficient. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine a city after a storm. If the city has well-funded repair crews, plenty of materials, and organized systems, damaged roads and power lines are fixed quickly. But if the city is already struggling, low resources, overwhelmed workers, even small damage can accumulate. Your metabolism works the same way. A metabolically healthy body repairs cellular damage much more effectively. Research from institutions like the Harvard Medical School has shown that oxidative stress, insulin resistance, and chronic inflammation can impair DNA repair pathways and increase cellular vulnerability. So the question becomes, how do you strengthen these repair systems? Let's talk about practical strategies. First, focus on antioxidant-rich nutrition. Your body relies on compounds like vitamin C, vitamin E, selenium, zinc, and glutathione to neutralize free radicals before they damage DNA. Foods that support this include leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cabbage, berries, citrus fruits, nuts and seeds. Second, support your body's master antioxidant, glutathione. Glutathione is heavily involved in detoxification and cellular protection. You can support glutathione production through foods rich in sulfur such as garlic, onions, eggs, broccoli, Brussels sprouts. Third, stabilize insulin levels. Chronically high insulin drives inflammation and oxidative stress, which weakens DNA repair capacity. Simple strategies help enormously here. Reduce ultra-processed carbohydrates, prioritize protein and healthy fats, practice time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting if appropriate. Fourth, prioritize sleep. During deep sleep, the body activates powerful repair systems that restore DNA integrity and reduce oxidative stress. Even one night of poor sleep can impair these mechanisms. If this kind of practical science-based health strategy is helpful, consider subscribing. Every day I share content designed to help you improve metabolism, energy, fat burning, and long-term health naturally. Because the goal isn't just to avoid harm. The goal is to build a body that repairs itself efficiently. Now, in the final insight, we'll bring everything together. You'll learn how to make smarter decisions about medical imaging, what questions to ask your doctor, and how to protect yourself without avoiding necessary care. Because informed patients make better health decisions for life. Now let's bring everything together with the sixth and most practical insight. The goal of this conversation is not to avoid medical imaging. CT scans, X-rays, and other diagnostic tools save millions of lives every year. When someone has a stroke, internal bleeding, or a serious infection, rapid imaging can make the difference between life and death. The real goal is using these technologies wisely. And fortunately, there are several simple strategies that allow you to benefit from modern medicine while minimizing unnecessary exposure. Let's start with the most important one. Ask one simple question before any scan. Will this test change the treatment plan? This is one of the most powerful questions a patient can ask. If the answer is yes, the scan will help guide an important medical decision, then it may absolutely be worth doing. But sometimes imaging is ordered simply to rule things out, even when the likelihood of serious disease is extremely low. In those situations, doctors may consider other options first. For example, ultrasound and MRI scans do not use ionizing radiation at all. These technologies rely on sound waves or magnetic fields to create images of the body. In many cases, especially for soft tissue, joints, or abdominal organs, they can provide the same information without radiation exposure. Next, it's helpful to keep a simple record of major imaging procedures throughout your life. Most people track medications, surgeries, and allergies, but very few track radiation exposure. Writing down the dates and types of CT scans you've had can help doctors make better decisions in the future. Another practical strategy involves understanding that technology has improved dramatically. Modern scanners are far more efficient than machines used decades ago. Many hospitals now use low-dose CT protocols, which significantly reduce radiation while still producing high-quality images. Organizations like the Radiological Society of North America have promoted initiatives encouraging hospitals to reduce unnecessary radiation exposure and optimize imaging protocols. And finally, let's talk about something within your control: your biological resilience. Maintaining strong metabolic health, balanced insulin levels, nutrient-dense foods, good sleep, and low chronic inflammation helps your body manage cellular stress far more effectively. You cannot control every medical situation, but you can control how well your body repairs and protects itself. Think of modern medicine like a powerful toolbox. CT scanners, MRI machines, and advanced diagnostics are incredible instruments, but like any powerful tool, they work best when used thoughtfully and precisely. And the more informed you are as a patient, the better those tools can serve your long-term health. Now, let's close by stepping back and looking at the bigger picture, what all of this means for protecting your health, your metabolism, and your longevity over the course of a lifetime. Let's step back for a moment and look at the bigger picture. Today we explored a topic that many people never think about, the invisible power of radiation inside modern hospitals. And the key message is not fear. The key message is understanding. Medical imaging is one of the most extraordinary achievements of modern science. Technologies like CT scans allow doctors to see inside the human body with incredible precision, detecting bleeding, tumors, infections, and injuries that once would have gone unnoticed. Used correctly, these tools save lives every single day. But as physicists like Richard Feynman often reminded us, powerful technology must always be matched with clear thinking and scientific awareness. So let's recap the most important insights we discussed. First, Connecticut scans deliver significantly more radiation than standard X-rays because they create detailed three-dimensional images using many beams. Second, ionizing radiation works by interacting with molecules inside your cells, producing free radicals that can damage DNA. Third, radiation exposure is cumulative. Every dose you receive adds to your lifetime exposure. Fourth, younger bodies, especially children, are more vulnerable because their cells divide rapidly and have more decades ahead for potential effects to develop. Fifth, your metabolic health plays a critical role in how well your body repairs cellular damage. Nutrition, antioxidants, sleep, and stable insulin levels strengthen the body's natural defense systems. And finally, informed patients can make smarter choices, asking the right questions, considering alternatives like ultrasound or MRI when appropriate, and keeping track of their imaging history. When you understand these principles, something powerful happens. You move from being a passive patient to an informed participant in your own healthcare. You begin asking better questions. You make decisions based on biology and evidence. And over time, those small decisions compound into something incredibly valuable: long-term health and resilience. Because the ultimate goal is not simply avoiding disease, the goal is building a body that remains energetic, metabolically flexible, and capable of repairing itself well into old age. So here's a simple challenge for you. The next time a medical test is recommended, pause for a moment and ask, is this the right tool for this situation? That one question alone can change the trajectory of your health decisions. And if today's conversation helped you understand your body and modern medicine in a clearer way, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. This channel is dedicated to helping people optimize their metabolism, energy, fat-burning physiology, and longevity using science that actually makes sense. Because when knowledge becomes practical, health becomes something you can actively build, one informed decision at a time.